Once a quarter, I want to have a meeting that's only about you. The way I start this meeting is I say, you and I are having lunch in 10 years. Tell me about a conversation. It's a very carefully worded question. When I say 10 years, they don't feel like they have to say something that is still with the company. The other thing that the 10-year mark does is it doesn't force them to think of the exact path. It just allows them to dream. And everybody loves to dream about what their future could be like. The other part of this conversation is we're having lunch. That's a visual, creates an anchor, right? And then the last part of this is tell me about your life. You can almost see in their eyes sparkle. It allows them to dream. You're not talking about the company. You're just talking about their lives. People are very grateful for that. And just that conversation, in my experience, has done wonders for helping people figure out what they want to do.
A positive company culture can increase employee loyalty, engagement, foster a sense of community, and ultimately drive better business outcomes. In this podcast, we'll explore how to build that culture using actionable techniques supported by stories that you can use right away to align your culture with your business values and goals.
Welcome to the morebusiness.com podcast. My name is Raj Khera. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Dr. Jeff Kaplan. He is CEO Coach of the Year from CEO Today magazine for 2022. So welcome, Jeff. Really excited to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Raj. It's great to be here. Great to see you again.
Today, we're going to be talking about cultivating a culture of gratitude inside your company. And I think a lot of times people hear about gratitude. We've seen in books about the law of attraction and things where we may be able to instill this sense of gratitude in our own personal lives. But getting it throughout your company is actually a different story. That's harder to do because you're trying to get everyone else on board with the whole concept of gratitude. So let's go into what are the basic things that a leader would need to do to start implementing this strategy where they could actually have a company that's filled with gratitude.
Well, I give you a story just to kind of get us going here, right? So there's a woman I worked with who eventually became the CEO of this organization. When you walk through the halls before she took over the helm, let's put it this way, the board kicked out the last guy, right? And you could just feel like the negative energy, right? And so she started, we had already been working together for about 9 months, and she was sort of embracing this idea of, gratitude and, naturally good at it. But she would do like town halls, and the town hall wasn't done until several people kind of popped up and said, what they were grateful for. And she would also do that at meetings. Now there was initial like, what, this is weird. And then they would go, well, I'm grateful for the weather today. Right. But there's, she didn't make anybody wrong. Right. She just kind of like, right. Next. And people started not only sharing in a much kind of deeper, more meaningful way, both about what they were grateful for in the organization, but also just themselves and anything else that was going on with them personally. But they really started looking forward to this part of the meetings. And so then fast forward, I go then walk through the halls, and it was just people like high-fiving each other down the hallways, and just people like, you could just feel it differently. So anyway, so the one way to do it is you begin or end meetings with an expression of gratitude. It's quick, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. You don't judge each other's expression of gratitude, and you also don't go then start having long conversations about what somebody said. You just kind of keep moving.
Okay, that's a very nice simple tactic, is just everybody say something nice. Honestly, it feels like something that you learned back in like really early childhood.
Exactly.
Right. But we forget as we become adults. So that's one tactic. Now, there's going to be the person in the office that kind of feels like, oh, this is weird. I don't express this way. I'm not one to share feelings. How do you cope with someone who may be approaching, this activity?
So, one of the things you could do is you could say, it's okay to pass. The analogy, for better or for worse, that just popped in my mind is if you've ever been to a rehab, like a inpatient rehab center, particularly one that's grounded in like some sort of spiritual core, right?
Mm-hmm.
everybody there, the patients, everybody like hugs everybody, right? And everyone is like so close, and you just feel like this, deep sort of connection. And then you get like, the kid or the adult who just popped it, just admitted, and they're like, kicking and screaming and like, "Yeah, F this is stupid," and, you go back like even just days later and they drank the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
And so, right. And because they're embraced with, excuse the expression, love and support and understanding and, not forced to express feelings if that's uncomfortable for them. But but eventually we all want to be part of something like that. Love does attract.
It does. It does. And my personal opinion is that I don't think we talk about love enough in business, and we don't have to use that word if it makes some
Right.
people uncomfortable. It could be just, I love the way you phrased it in your leadership, which is leading with heart. And I think that's
Right.
a much more, I don't know, digestible way for some people to absorb
Right.
the same
Acceptable.
message.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really something. Well, what are some of the other challenges that an executive or other leadership teams might encounter when they're trying to get their entire company to embrace
So,
gratitude?
yeah, one of the words that just came up was genuineness, right? So, one could say, okay, so when you're faced with major financial challenges, you're laying off 15% of the workforce, you're freezing bonuses, you're, you've got internal conflicts that haven't been dealt with.
Mm.
And then you're going to say, oh, I'm grateful for, these board meetings or, whatever.
Feels very disingenuous.
It feels
Yeah.
disingenuous, right? And so, but to me, the solution around that piece is first of all, obviously you have to deal with core systemic issues, right? Alongside it, this can't be like, a fake Band-Aid, right? To
Yeah.
ignore the systemic
Right.
issues, right? So you have to communicate you have to not just deal with the systemic issues, but communicate what you're doing in different ways and often. And you can also qualify what this is and what this isn't, right? Like this isn't about ignoring the problems that we have. This is, we're going to just take 5 minutes before we end the meeting just to carve out a space of gratitude. And we can go right back into the crap when we're done if we would like. But this is 5 minutes of quality time.
Mhm.
Let me just share real quick a personal example. So one of the things that my husband and I started like 20 years ago is Gratitude Sundays. Okay? And every Sunday, we alternate. Somebody cooks for the other, right? Serves like a 5-course meal or something, right? And then we end the meal with gratitude, right? Like, this is what I'm grateful for about you this week. This is what I'm grateful for about myself this week. And this is what I'm grateful for about the relationship this week. In 20 years, there's been, I'd say twice, where we were having a bad day, right? We were arguing, like it wasn't a fun, peaceful household at that moment. But we had gratitude. And at the end of the meal, we talked about what we were grateful for. And it just brought perspective back.
So creating the habit, regardless of what's going on, just creating that habit can actually help you overcome a lot of other things. So one of my friends is a physician, and he was telling me that no matter what argument he'd be getting into with anybody in the morning in the household, maybe, this is like, that's it, we're getting a divorce, we're like, we're done with each other. And he would go to his hospital and he would start treating patients. He said, there's absolutely nothing in this world that can pass the feeling of like helping someone, right? And just being grateful for what they are, what they're about is a way of helping them, right? And so, and he found that like all those other problems and everything would just completely dissipate once he started feeling that feeling of gratitude. It's really,
Well, good for him, right?
Yeah.
Because, a lot of physicians can get so stuck with, right,
True.
the
True.
numbers game, the issues of healthcare, and they lose perspective. That's why they got into medicine,
True.
right? But they
Yeah.
lose that perspective.
That is true. Yeah. And I think that even happens with some executives that I know that sometimes they get a little bigger head, because they've had a couple of wins and,
Right.
kind of think that they know everything. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe, like take a step back a little bit.
Gratitude is linked to overall happiness. There's research, folks that research this a lot that I used to quote a lot. One is Robert Emmons. He wrote Professor Emmons, he wrote a book called Thanks. Now, this is a heavy book. I'm not recommending for those looking for light reading. But it's all about the research of gratitude, right? And you can't not read that book and not really fully appreciate that this is real stuff. And the other one that is more accessible for, quite frankly, me and other folks is by Tal Ben-Shahar, and a professor at Harvard who back in the day, he, started a course that people used to call the Happy Course. His first class had 4 students in it, I think it was. And his third class ended up far surpassing what was at the time the most popular class, which was freshman economics at Harvard. So his happiness course really took off. But if you just type in Ben Tal-Shahar, he talks about the research of gratitude and these types of things, but also gives stories about it, right? And it's funny, really quickly, just because it popped in my mind. Somebody who finally met him once, and she's like, wow, I thought you'd be so much taller. And, it's like we project into other, people. But anyway, I would highly encourage anyone to look at some of his lectures online. A lot of them are available for free.
Are there things that people can do in their personal lives to start bringing this sense of gratitude to the company? I'll give you an example of something that I've done. I probably should do it a little bit more frequently, but I've got a tiny little spiral notebook that I keep near my desk, my nightstand at night. And I will write on there the date, and then today I'm grateful for. Yep. It could be anything. It could be taking my kids to a soccer game. It could be, my kids coming home from college. You get to enjoy them for the holidays, whatever it is. But I put a little note down in there. People say you could do it every night. I just don't do it every night. It's almost like a little diary. And actually, I look back to stuff from 5 years ago. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that was happening around that time. And that really helps you focus on what you've done. Are there other habits that people can maybe try to instill in their own personal lives that will then permeate to their corporate life?
Yeah, well, what you're talking about is a gratitude journal, and both Emmons and Shahar both mentioned the researcher in gratitude journal. That became popularized probably 20 years ago by Oprah Winfrey. But the research came from this field of positive psychology. And what you do is when you write those things, right, 5 or whatever, is you embrace it, right? One of the things that just popped up, Raj, as you were speaking, was imagine a culture and a company, organization wide, where every organization, you have your the company approved signature line, like it's your name and your title in this way, and then it's your phone number, and then it's a link to a website or whatever. Imagine if what I am grateful for is X, right? And then imagine, right, it starts getting fun where you start noticing every week somebody kind of changes what they're grateful for that week. And then it's fun to, like, on Monday, see like, oh, wow, that's what they're grateful for this week. I mean, what a cool, subtle way to be able to do it. It takes no time, hardly, right? And yet can really have a good impact.
That's a wonderful idea. Update your signature line every week with something new that you're grateful for, or just stick it to once a month. Just like say, I'm grateful for whatever it is. And you don't have to touch it if you don't want to bother with it. But that's just like that alone conveys a message, conveys a feeling about you. That's a wonderful idea. Yeah. What are some of the other ways? I mean, I can share some of the habits that I guess I try to do as well. I mean, the gratitude journal is one of them. Another one that I do, and I guess it's not something that's like a verbal expression, but I smile to people I don't know. And I don't know that this is great for everyone, because sometimes people can, misunderstand what what the smile means. But here's what I mean. Like if I'm at the grocery store checkout line and I'm getting my milk and the cashier's there, I would just smile and I'll say hi. And literally that's it. I don't need to say anything else, but that simple act of somebody smiling at you and saying hello. And this is clearly a non, a can't be misunderstood situation, right? I'm just checking out of the grocery store line. Hi. And that's it. My goodness, the smiles you get back, amazing. It feels like you just sort of brighten someone's day because everybody else is just kind of churning through like it's some sort of factory. And then you just get someone to say hello, makes them feel good. When they feel good, suddenly I start to feel good. What happens physically at that point is I suddenly stand taller and like I breathe. It's just so weird. All that stuff happens with this simple act of saying hello and smiling.
Yeah, that's great. So who came to mind, I'm going to do a shout out to my sister, Julie. I don't know anyone else like her, that no matter where we go, we'll be at a restaurant and she'll like tell the waitress, she's like, I'm not a lesbian, but your eyes are just so beautiful. Like she'll just make these comments, and and even like if the service is like bad, she's like, oh, it's, I know it's not, it's not your fault. We understand. She's just so incredibly good at just helping people, particularly because I see it mostly in service, and where we're getting served, but service. But anyway, she's amazing. So anyway, I tried to channel Julie the other day. I ordered, groceries delivered, and I've become an extra introvert over the years. So I have to like pull it out, like kind of what you were just talking about. Kind of have to pull out that. And so the guy, I met him at the door, and I'm just like, "How are you doing?" And he answered, and then I'm like, "Do you have any, like good plans for the weekend?" And then he just started asking me a question, and he was just like it was excited, like it was like a silly moment that brightened his day a little bit, right? And obviously it brightened mine, because here I am talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So I would just say, even if you are an introvert, or you feel like you don't do feelings, or you feel like it's inappropriate, like just maybe give yourself a little challenge, 3 times a day, or depending on your circumstances, just make a commitment, at work and perhaps in your personal life, to just bring a smile into a conversation.
And I think that's so critical, right? If you bring a smile to someone else, that is an expression of gratitude. It doesn't always have to be something verbal, right? But when you start to do that, that ends up being part of you, and you can't help but bring that to not just the company, but honestly, through every aspect of your life, your personal life, your family life, your friendships, and everything like that. All starts to, I think, get better. There's another technique that I recommend people do, and it's volunteering. And I know companies oftentimes will have volunteer days. For example, a lot of companies give Martin Luther King Day in the U.S. off to do service. And it's not necessarily a company picked activity. It's just, look, we're giving you the day off. Whatever's important to you, just go do service for that nonprofit that day. And it could be helping in a soup kitchen. It could be anything. And I tell people, hey, look, really just volunteer for anything. There could be a race in your city, like a 5K, 10K race or something. And if you're not going to run in it, that's fine. Be a volunteer. Be one of those people cheering all those other runners on. Be, volunteer at the water desk. There's so many opportunities. Just that little act of selflessly giving of your time makes you feel good, makes other people feel good. It's also another expression of gratitude. And when you do that as a company, I think that also instills the fact that you're walking the walk, not just talking.
1,000%. Assume good intent, because I was trying to think. All right, so what's the critical voice, saying as they're listening to this conversation? And they say, well, but talking about conflict, right? And we tend to live in a projective society, and so when someone does something that doesn't feel good, or says something that doesn't feel good, remember that they're a human being too. Like they have a mother, they have a father, right? And they are people too. And they, they didn't wake up, Bob didn't wake up in the morning and say, I really hope to make, Samantha's day lousy, right? And so if we can start the day and just say, I'm going to start the day assuming good intent. And so and be grateful for just human interaction. And if something doesn't go well, rather than getting it stuck in the negativity, right? Be curious. Go shift to the curious. right? Curiosity is another way to cultivate a culture of gratitude.
You know, there's a story about Ben Franklin, who used to say he'd get up in the morning and say to himself, "What good can I do today?" And he would end the day going to bed saying, "What good have I done today?" What a wonderful bookend to put on the start and end of your day to see, to frame how you're going to be interacting with other people, and all the activities that you have to do, and actually prioritize your sense of purpose even, as part of your daily activities.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager and young adult, really young adult, I remember, I'd have bad days, right? um, and then I remember kind of hearing about this idea about gratitude. And so I started to end my day with gratitude. So I wouldn't journal, but I would lay in as I'm getting to sleep, I would go through the day and I'd think about what I was grateful for that day. So fast forward after a couple of years, I'm like, well, I haven't had a bad day in like 2 years. And I'm like, what's changed? I'm like, oh, that's what's changed. And so to this day, so for now, we're talking decades. Every day I go to sleep, when I get in bed, I go through and I slow it down, like slow it till I woke up. What time did I wake up? Oh yeah. So, and I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head, and like, all right, so I went to the bathroom. I'm grateful that, I have heat in my house. Right. And then, I said, I'm grateful for my friend Raj. I'm grateful for the fact that I can see the good in others. And as you go through the day, you start realizing there's all these layers of gratitude that you have and that you're able to get in touch with, and then you fall asleep because you slowed it down, and it focuses your mind, and it's a great way to fall asleep and a good transition into that, and then when you wake up, you ended the day before.
What a wonderful springboard to actually launch into sleeping and
Right.
hopefully leading to good dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if not, the dreams are working out probably what, needs to be worked out, anyway,
Yeah.
right. So starting the day maybe with an intent, what I intend for this day is to bring happiness to myself and others.
Yeah.
Right. And then ending the day with gratitude. I guess it's a little Ben Franklin-ish.
So to close it out in terms of what a leadership team member could do to help cultivate this sense of giving inside their company, is to just, at their next company meeting, have a little session that says, "Hey, I wanted to just go around and have everybody say what they're thankful for real quick." I mean, it's almost like a Thanksgiving table. Is there another approach? It could feel awkward for a lot of people to just suddenly start doing this when they've never done this before.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I just thought about as you were speaking was walk the talk, right? Again, like, so let's say you're a CEO and that you don't, you're not humble, you're arrogant, and you're not empathetic, you're insensitive.
Which, by the way, if you're that way, you don't know that you're that way usually.
Well, that's fair. I mean, that's fair, right? Unless you're fully embracing narcissism, right?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe start getting feedback, right?
Yeah.
But so, so one, it's just that, I often say that, if you regularly acknowledge others, right? Not praising, but acknowledging, talked a little bit in a previous podcast about this, then that creates momentum, right? And if you ever have to give a negative feedback or like critical, like developmental feedback, it's easier for people to hear, right? And so I would say, particularly for the problem solvers out there, a lot of senior leaders came through the ranks because they solved problems. You have a natural ability to see what's wrong, see what needs fixing, see what's not working. Try to shift that, right? And look for what's right. So throughout the week, look for what's right and give voice and recognition to what's right, and build off of that. You'll get more of what's right because you're giving energy and voice to it.
So just as part of your, what Tom Peters, I think it was, used to call MYOB, management by walking around. And as you're walking around, notice the really good things to be grateful for. and just mention it, call it out, right? And so that's a good
Yeah.
way to get started.
And care about the people, not just like the worth, right? Like,
Mhm.
how are you today?
Yeah.
Right? And what are you excited about? And what are you grateful for?
Yeah.
Right? Just to connect at a values level.
There's a technique that I use. It's been really effective for me as a leader, and I would go to every team member that was a direct report to me, and I would encourage these people to do it to their direct reports as well. But what I would say is, look, I know we have regular team meetings. We got to do updates on projects, all that kind of stuff that we're talking about. But once a quarter, maybe once every 4 months or so, I want to have a meeting that's only about you. And we're going to talk about where you want to be. And the way I start this meeting is I say, hey, you and I are having lunch in 10 years. Tell me about a conversation. What are you doing? What's your life like? And what this does is, it's a very carefully worded question. What it does is, when I say 10 years, they don't feel like they have to say something that is, oh, I'm still with the company, because 10 years is pretty far down. Chances are I wouldn't even be with the company anymore, right? So, so that gives them a way to free their mind of that. The other thing that the 10-year mark does is, it doesn't force them to think of the exact path they're going to do to get there. It just allows them to dream. And everybody loves to dream about what their future could be like if they were allowed to let loose. And so that's what it is. The other part of this conversation is, we're having lunch. And so that's a visual, creates an anchor so that people can actually see themselves. And I might even say something, we're having lunch at a really nice restaurant. It kind of elevates them to the status that, oh yeah, well, I'm going to be affording really nice restaurants in 10 years without question, right? And then the last part of this is, tell me about your life. Tell me about what are we talking about? And then you can almost see in their eyes like sparkle, because they're thinking about, well, right now I'm a manager of marketing. I want to be a chief marketing officer, or I'm leading a team. I've got my own company. I'm retired, traveling the world, whatever it is, but it allows them to dream. And because you're not talking about the company, you're just talking about their lives, people are very grateful for that. And just that conversation, in my experience, has really done wonders for like helping people figure out what they want to do.
Well, it's a selfish act. It's a selfless act, right? That's what you're doing.
I also trace it back. So after we talk about the dream, I'll say something like, first, I'm usually really excited for them, because everybody talks about these wonderful things that they want to accomplish. And I genuinely get excited about hearing where they want to take their lives. So I'll say something like, so what would be a marker in 5 years for you to know that you're on track for doing that in 10? And then it starts to, okay, well, that would mean if I want to be chief marketing officer, I probably need to do this in the next 5 years. And then we just take it back further, 2 to 3 years, what kind of activities you need. And then I say, well, let's tie it into the next 12 months. What experiences can I help you get while you're here at this company to get you on that track for the next 2, 3 years, 5 years, and that 10 years? And then that way I can actually try to align things like, oh, you want one of the Salesforce certifications. Let's get you on a course that can do that. Let's, whatever it is, but it enables people to see progress and a path. And when you care about them, my God, the gratitude it's a two-way street. I feel good that I've been able to help somebody with that, but at the same time, they're also seeing why they want to stay with this company and not go look for another job. Right.
Imagine, so a little spinoff I just came to mind is, imagine gratitude conversations, right? So once a month, right, you have gratitude conversations, and 2 or more people come together and they say, this is what I'm grateful for, right? I'm grateful for Raj, you being so supportive of me and having the conversations like this. And, I'm grateful for the fact that you care about my development beyond even just this job. Right. And you're saying, I'm grateful for how, committed you are to this mission and that kind of thing. But just imagine that, just gratitude circles, or even just gratitude club, right? And just creating again a space for conversation that's not about fixing anything, but noticing with awe and appreciation. And again, quick, doesn't, have to be, a huge deal.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciated this conversation. I'm grateful for the conversation. I hope that the dialogues that we've had today, because we've shared numerous ideas that you've seen your coaching clients implement, that you've implemented personally. I've shared some too. And hopefully somewhere in there is a nugget or two that someone would be able to take back to their company, to their life, and implement. You don't have to implement everything. You don't have to implement something that you're not comfortable with, but I think there's enough in here to give you a spark that will help you on your way to creating that corporate culture of gratitude, which will then elevate your entire company. You'll make more money and you'll have happier employees, happier customers. Thanks, Jeff. Really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Raj.